Hey guys, welcome to another week of Entrepreneur, and really appreciate you joining today. Today we're going to talk about one of the most important things in the world, which is protecting you, protecting your family. We're talking about asset protection. What I mean by asset protection is inevitably problems happen, lawsuits happen, losses happen. Well, you got to make sure that you're financially protected, that your family is financially protected, that your estate and your business is financially protected. So, this is what I mean by asset protection to begin with. But while we give a few minutes for people to join, and please, if you have any questions, throw it in chat as I'm going along the way. Really want to be responsive, and if I don't explain something right, I definitely want to make sure that I'm doing. So please make sure that you enter any questions in chat. We'll even come back, answer it later. Pretty please subscribe. Check us out. We do this every single week. And as we're getting things going, I gotta say, I'm missing having Jillian join today, but we're going to talk about all kinds of fun stuff. Thanks for Jillian joining in the chat. But I have to share this. I think it's hilarious. I sent you a text. I tried to dictate, thank you very much. But I said, merci beaucoup. It's French. So that's what I tried to text. Unfortunately, it didn't really work out that well. What came across, thank you, Jillian, for not taking it personally. Nasty beaucoup. Yeah, definitely not ever going to be doing that one again. So, but in any case, we are going to be sharing, talking about, and diving into asset protection. Why now? You know what? I'm singing to the choir. If you're in business already, you realize that the economy has risks. Real estate, interest rates going up, problems are happening, difficulties are occurring, and even if it's not now, it's inevitable. I cut my teeth doing deals back in Las Vegas, early 2000s. I was there 2008 through 2012, and I had been practicing asset protection before that time, but my God, the need for it really, really, really became evident. And hopefully we never have those issues ever again, but you got to be ready. So with that, please, let's just dive in, share. Now, I'm here to talk business, but this is very much a legal subject. So I'm going to do the good old-fashioned CYA. I am an attorney. I am not your attorney, unless I am. But all of this information is truly there for, well, one reason: to give you education, to give you information, to hopefully help when the time comes. So, but I really have to share, there's different strategies, and there's different strategies based on where your risk is. But the most important thing for you to know, and this is the most important takeaway: start today. And I'm not saying start today just because it's smart, but you need to start today because you have to be set up, you have to be protected before there's ever even a problem. And there's a law behind why this is true. It is called the fraudulent transfer doctrine. Fraudulent transfer doctrine means you're transferring assets for the purpose of defeating creditor claims. It sounds horrible, fraudulent. The reality is every bit of asset protection triggers that law because you're literally setting up and transferring your belongings in the structures and the ways that I'll explain for the purpose of defeating creditors' claims. We're right in the middle of why there is the fraudulent conveyance doctrine. However, with that doctrine, with those laws, and every state in the US has them, there is what's called a statute of limitations. A statute of limitations means there's only this time period that if you end up going to court, you end up with a judgment. A court can actually unwind all of your asset protection, but they can only do this during that statute of limitations. In most states, it's 4 years. In some states, it's as long as 6 years. That's like New York is. A few states, it is a 2-year statute of limitations. And ideally, you are setting up whatever asset protection structures you need to protect you, protect your business, and protect your family. In those states that have a 2-year statute of limitations for the fraudulent conveyance, that's really, again, where I got to know all of this, because one of the big states very traditionally was Nevada. You've heard about Nevada Asset Protection Trusts. It has been the gold standard in the US for, well, a state laws, jurisdiction, and trust structure that can ultimately protect your assets. There are now quite a few other states that do have this 2-year protection or 2-year fraudulent conveyance doctrine risk. And so Nevada is still one. We also have Wyoming is great. Alaska is great. South Dakota is there as well. And so there's these few states that they are really focused on and have created laws to help protect you. Now, if you haven't been able to prepare, and again, you need to do this 2 years before there's ever even a problem. That's why you have to start today. If you don't start today and you wait until there is an issue that occurs, you can't wait for the claim to already be attacking you. But if you think that there's going to be a lawsuit or a problem or a claim right around the corner and you want to protect your family, and if you don't want to protect your family, that's something else entirely. But if you want to protect your family, the only alternative at that point is actually to take your assets offshore. And there are different jurisdictions that are countries that, again, they have their specialized laws that are very specific to asset protection. When I set up a offshore asset protection trust structure, we use the Cook Islands. It's actually a little island that probably has more attorneys than government, more attorneys than police. It's literally just set up to be for asset protection in this little island. Also, there's countries, a lot are in the Caribbean, that will offer offshore asset protection for like LLCs and business entities. Now, I'm talking about this at a very high level. And I'm going to dive in quite a bit deeper into what strategies we use based on what kind of risks you're trying to protect from. And to just really jump in there, when I'm talking about the assets to protect, it includes everything that you own: your home, your cash, your individual, if you have a bunch of real estate, how to protect all these different properties, even if there's a lawsuit at one property affecting another property. And then ultimately, of course, you need to protect your business. And while we go through these strategies, just know that regardless of where your risk comes from, there's a way to protect from it. And we're going to cover all of it. We do have Kaju. I'm going to answer that, but I'm going to answer that when we really start talking about LLCs and the structure and how that protects. So please continue to tune in. We'll be talking about that momentarily. But that's where I was saying you can end up with lawsuits everywhere. And if you have a lawsuit at your business level. How are you protecting your other assets in your home? You personally get sued. How do you protect your real estate or your business? Or your real estate gets sued. One of those wild, somebody gets shot at a apartment complex. These things happen, not your fault, on average for any entrepreneur out there. There is a lawsuit about every 13 years. I understand that that is kind of the average between the occurrences. That's without saying that that entrepreneur ever did anything wrong. But the reality is the risk is there and anybody can sue anybody. Either you're hiding assets, and guess what? That's not asset protection. Maybe some people will use their living trust to own their home, thinking that that's asset protection. No, there are ways to title your home that does allow for some protection. But titling an LLC, as an example, a court can pierce right through it. Let me scream that again. Your living trust is not an asset protection vehicle. Don't expect it to occur. Let's talk very specifically about your business. Your business best practice, and you should have heard this plenty of times in the past, is to be owned by an LLC, a corporation. There's also ways to do limited partnerships, all of which offer a level of asset protection to the owner. That becomes you being the owner. So we're making an assumption that your business got sued. Don't care if you did it or not. As long as you have that business set up in the LLC, you have the claim. The claim is against the LLC as the owner. But because it is a limited liability vehicle, there's legal protections between the LLC and the owners, or the corporation and the owners. That's the basis of what limited liability is. And again, let me just scream and yell this. The LLC, corporation, other limited liability entities, I'm just going to use LLCs as an example, are there to protect you, the owner, and to protect your family, and to protect the assets that aren't owned by that LLC. If there's a claim against one LLC, you got to make sure that it only stays in that one entity. We'll cover how to set up your LLC structures to make sure that all of your assets end up being protected. Kajo, now it's time to answer your question. What if you do business in one state, but your LLC is located in another? What state law are you subject to should anything happen? And so here's the answer. You are subject to the laws for your activities in any state that you are doing business. A few examples: if you have an office shop, you're subject to the laws of wherever that office is located. Same with real estate. If you have a piece of real estate, you're subject to the laws of whatever state that it's located in. But now we can even expand it from there. My business, or I'm located, my office right now that I'm sitting in is in Texas. Yeah, I'm subject to Texas law. However, that's not it, because I do business coast to coast. I have clients absolutely everywhere. And I'm subject to those laws of those states that my clients are located in, at least to the limited purpose of a lawsuit based on those services, or if I sold you an asset, if I sold you what was I even thinking? A ladder, something so simple, but then you fall off and you say it's a faulty ladder. I put it into the stream of commerce. I sold it to you. Now you're injured based on the problems and the risks and the negligence occurring through that ladder, still subject to claims and risk. That being said, even if you get a judgment in, I'll just use Texas as an example. The state of Texas does have jurisdiction on any assets that I have the LLC has in the state of Texas. They will be able to claim against everything that is located in that state in particular. But let's use an example of, I'm located in Texas. My entity is formed in Nevada. I'm doing business in Florida, just because that's where some of my clients are at. I get sued by a client in Florida. I get a judgment in the state of Florida. I don't own anything in the state of Florida. So they have to take their judgment to the state that my LLC is actually set up in Nevada. And then they have to try to enforce that agreement through the courts in Nevada, not just the courts in Florida. And so that's where, if you have operations in one state, maybe you have an effect in another state, maybe the same. But then you also have where you actually set up your LLC. And I'll tell you, nowadays, if you're looking at asset protection set up in the United States, there are 3 states that are kind of the go-to. There are different states that offer different types of protections. However, we will generally just leverage Delaware. We will leverage Nevada. And right now, more than anything, Wyoming. Comically, why Wyoming? Nevada used to be the absolute best state to do asset protection in, right up until they started jacking up the cost of entities. Wyoming eventually said, okay, you know what? We're just going to borrow those laws. We're going to do the exact same thing as what Nevada is, but we're going to charge 25% of the filing fees and amounts that Nevada is. So that's really the main reason why Wyoming at this point is a huge area of asset protection. Another question, is there a situation that you wouldn't recommend an LLC? My tax strategist recommends to switch to an S or a C Corp when the business makes over a certain amount. And just so that you understand, a limited liability entity that provides you the protection. Doesn't matter if it's a corporation, doesn't matter if it's an LLC, it doesn't matter if it's a limited partnership. I will tell you that the biggest decision points are based on the state laws where you actually form the entity, as well as tax considerations. As an example, I've, again, set up my asset protection LLC in Nevada. Something that's unique about LLCs is there's not a tax category for LLCs. You actually pick it. So you can have your LLC taxed as a C Corp or an S Corp. If you don't have any partners, it's disregarded, and you actually report your taxes directly onto your personal tax return unless you make the election for that LLC to be taxed as a corporation, either way. So tax considerations really are important. This is why LLCs are superior, at least in the states that are really focused on asset protection. If you have a claim against an LLC, it wins. Now the LLC owes $100,000. Or no, let me flip that around. You get sued. You own an LLC that's in Nevada with assets. All that your creditor, personal creditor, can receive, they call it a charging order against the LLC, where any distributions that are coming to you actually get paid to the creditor. If it's just a corporation that you own, there's not that charging order protection. So the creditor can actually take your ownership of the corporation rather than this distribution protection that they otherwise offer to LLCs. One of the reasons why we use LLCs more than anything, limited partnerships also have that similar type of protection, but having that charging order protection, again, just to repeat myself, where if there's a judgment against you, the judgment creditor, your creditor, cannot take ownership of the LLC. They can receive those distributions. Don't take distributions. Make your investments, run your business through the LLC. Just don't pay out dividends. There's different ways, and I'm not going to cover these because they are a little bit more secret. Different ways for you to still benefit from what's in the LLC, use it, leverage it, spend it without taking those distributions, those dividends. So there's always a solution there. I'm just going to say this over and over and over. Just make sure that you are working with a knowledgeable, qualified attorney on any asset protection goals. And this is where I give you at least a little pitch. If you'd like my help, please go to the website Estate Protection Lawyers. I own a lot of different law firms. This is just one of them, specifically focused on asset protection. Don't care, well, love it if you work with me and my guys. However, just make sure that you are working with some attorney that has that experience to make sure that you, your family, is protected. All right, to get back to this, we have talked about how claims against your business can be protected against you, your family, and your personal belongings. Let's jump on to the next type of claim. Now you have all of your assets, but one of your, as an example, real estate properties got sued. Now, everything that's within that LLC is at risk. If you only have one LLC, that all of your assets, your business assets, your real estate is all held under one LLC, guess what? Everything within that LLC is at risk. AKA, just because it's a lawsuit against 123 Smith Street, if that LLC owns a block over on Bob Street, that creditor, that judgment plaintiff can claim against everything. So now let's look at how to use LLCs to protect asset by asset. I call this horizontal asset protection. It's just my own verbiage because you are protecting one by one the different properties, the different assets you may hold. And there are two different strategies that you can really use and leverage to protect this property by property. And it really doesn't matter if it's your business, a different LLC, cash. If there is a claim against one of those assets, as long as you have a holding company, underneath the holding company are different LLCs for different assets. So in this example, if you have 5 properties, you have an operating business, and you have a whole bunch of cash, you will want to have your operating business or different operating businesses, each in a different LLC. If you have multiple pieces of real estate, you can have those multiple pieces of real estate in separate LLCs. You have collections, art, your Rolex collection, your gun collection, whatever it may be. It can be owned by the holding company directly. I still prefer to use some LLC for that because I literally want nothing to happen at that holding company level. Because any activity, any assets creates potential liability. Even if it's you sell a piece of art and the buyer is upset and angry and now they sue whoever the seller of the art was. Well, if that seller of the art was that holding company, now they try to get at all of the assets of that holding company, including the other businesses and real estate. But if that art collection is held within its own LLC, then the claim is against that one LLC, and you basically can sever. Go ahead and claim against that LLC. Now that's at risk, but everything else that I own is not at risk against that judgment. So having a holding company and multiple different LLCs, and this was traditionally how we did it. When I started practicing law in Nevada, I would literally have clients that had their holding company with 100 different LLCs underneath it for 100 different properties. Oh my God, it became an administrative nightmare, all of those filings. I do want to note from a tax perspective, as long as there's 100% ownership and you don't elect to get taxed as a corporation, there's actually not separate tax returns for all of these different entities underneath the holding company. Everything rolls up to that primary holding company tax return. So from that tax perspective, it's not horrible. But there's filings that you have to do at the state level. There's filing fees that you generally have to do at the state level. That would be on an entity by entity basis. And if you're in one of these states that, hey, we charge $300, $500 per year, that can get expensive. There's a more recent solution. This has been around for about 30 years, but really not used a lot until about the Great Recession time period, is people actually understanding how a series LLC works. Now with this series LLC, you still get the protection asset by asset, very similar to this holding company structure. However, let's make life cheaper. Let's make life easier. Let's put all of your assets under one LLC, but still have the asset to asset protection. In this case, we're still making the assumption that one of your real estate pieces got sued. There's a judgment. There's a loan that's gone into default, and the lender is taking action against the property. If you have a personal guarantee, that's something else entirely. But let's just pretend like there's not a personal guarantee. Maybe it's a hard money loan. If you use a series LLC, you get that protection like the holding company and all these separate LLCs underneath it. But with a series LLC, you set up, different states will call it different things, different cells, different series. And when you set up the LLC, each different series may have its own agreements, its own terms. It has to have their own bank accounts. They have to have their own bookkeeping. Those are the very important components to maintaining the protection through a series LLC, asset by asset. But here is a much easier way to have that same level of protection horizontally between all of your different assets through an LLC model. Now, why I was saying that, hey, you've got to have separate bookkeeping, separate accounting, separate bank accounts. It's because of this concept, we call it piercing the corporate veil. And even though it's traditionally been known as piercing the corporate veil, it actually applies to all types of limited liability entities. And if you don't maintain proper corporate governance, LLC governance, you don't treat each, in this case, series, or you don't treat each LLC underneath a holding company like it's its own business, it's not going to be treated like it's separate limited liability vehicle. With the piercing the corporate veil, there are a couple of other risk factors. So let me just kind of dive in a little bit deeper into what that can actually mean. And with piercing the corporate veil, they call it the alter ego. And have seen it in the past plenty of times. I register an LLC under my own name. So when I get checks to me, I'm still depositing them in the LLC. I'm treating it like it's my alter ego. Or I'm using that LLC to go ahead and just directly buy myself groceries, pay for dinner, pay for things that are really personal expenses. But for whatever reason, the money's already in the LLC. You're just using the LLC for these personal purposes. That's really a lot of the times where piercing the corporate veil occurs. You don't want that to happen. Any use of an LLC, just make sure that you're using the proper bookkeeping. Corporate governance is just going to keep coming back to the same. Make sure that you're working with a knowledgeable law firm and attorney to make sure that you're doing everything properly. And even from a higher level, right now we're talking about asset protection, and there's a couple of other different strategies and considerations that I'm going to go through. But I keep harping on this. Get your attorney that knows what's going on, that understands the issues. And please, pretty please, use them. And if you don't have a lawyer, or you have different issues that your lawyer isn't specialized in, this is a service, yourlawyerreferrals.com, that if you have a problem, they'll solve it. Actually, they'll connect you with an attorney in wherever you need that attorney. Usually it's within the state. It may even be within the county. But if you're getting divorced, it's a different attorney than you have a business lawsuit, which is a different attorney from if you have a personal injury claim. You got to make sure that you're working with attorneys that very much specialize and focus in your area of having a problem, and be knowledgeable on the laws that are needed in the area that is needed to make sure that, again, you are protected. Having both a good lawyer as well as having a good insurance is super important for asset protection. And even though I'm talking about these different legal structural strategies to, now we've talked about protecting assets to assets. We've also talked about your business risks affecting your family. The first line of defense actually is insurance. Because if the claims aren't bigger than your insurance policy, it really isn't going to get to you anyways. However, there are times, we all know that there are times from the health insurance side, from the property insurance side, from the errors and omissions, your business umbrella policy. The insurance companies, they want to get out of any claims. They don't want to pay for anything. They don't want to defend you. That's not their business of defending you. It's to minimize what they're actually paying out. So even if you do have insurance, consider putting one of these plans in place before you ever have a problem, to make sure that even if that occurs, it doesn't affect you. Now, we're going to talk about the last really important protection. And that's if you personally get sued. Now, if you personally get sued, like what we've gone through, the creditor can claim against all of your other assets that you directly own. Don't care if it's real estate. Don't care if it's a business if you own it directly. Don't care if it's cash. And even these judgment creditors, they're going to try to get at your LLCs. As long as they're done properly, they can get that charging order, but they can't take the ownership. But at the end of the day, everything that you personally own is at risk if you personally get sued. Guess what? There's a solution here as well, and it's to set up an asset protection trust. This asset protection trust, actually, you move everything that you own that is not already protected into this asset protection trust. Your LLCs, your homes, your cash, your business. All of that can be owned directly by the trust, or even better, the trust owns an LLC, which owns the assets. Because there are a lot of rules around asset protection trusts. Who needs to manage them? How they are protective? That fraudulent conveyance doctrine that I was explaining. Most states will not allow you individually and personally to be the trustee in control of that trust. Don't worry about it. You're still the beneficiary. You still have the right to any of the income, profits. We call it the corpus. All of the assets within the trust still goes to you. You're just giving up control to whoever that trustee of the trust is. It's okay. If that trust owns 100% of an LLC that you control, then the trust has all of those same protections like we had covered with the series LLCs or the holding company and other LLCs. Now the trust, as the owner, will have all of those protections. Now you have this personal claim against, well, yourself. They can even go after the trust because you're the beneficiary of it, but they can't get at the assets. Again, keep coming back to, these are very specialized types of asset protection trusts. And with these types of asset protection trusts, like I was saying, there are different types of laws in different states and different jurisdictions, including the Cook Islands offshore or Nevada. There are some rules that may say, hey, it has to be a third party. Some rules say, or in some states say, you can actually control it as a trustee. Some states will say you have to use a non-family member or a professional trust company. Based on where you set it up, where the assets are titled to, you have different types and levels of protection. Just going to keep coming back to, make sure you're working with a good attorney to make sure that that actually does protect you. I know that that can be complicated, to say the very least. And now, just kind of as a overall summary, ultimately, we want to protect all of your assets. Whether or not there are lawsuits at your business, the individual asset, or that personal property, you get sued individually. You want to make sure that you're protected all the way around. And so here's the structure that you can just put into place. And it will protect every type of lawsuit from every type of protection direction between yourself and your assets, between your assets and yourself, and between the assets themselves. Here's the final answer and what you need to do. Step one, you set up this asset protection trust. Maybe it's international, maybe it's domestic, Nevada, Wyoming. Different laws, different treatment. But your first step is to set something up that is this asset protection trust to protect any issues, lawsuits, claims against yourself, against any of your business or other holdings. That trust, which you technically don't control, and because you technically don't control it, the court can't tell you to do anything with it. However, really the best practice is for that asset protection trust to own one LLC. That LLC you manage, you control, you have access to the accounts and the cash and can spend, invest, do whatever you need to do from a business and protection sense directly through that LLC that you control. Now we have severed the ownership and control between you personally and the trust. You've also allowed yourself to maintain and control the assets. And then above that LLC that you're managing is where you either have a series LLC protecting the asset to asset, or you're using this holding company type structure and strategy to protect asset to asset. But once you get this plan in place, doesn't matter which direction the claims come from, ultimately, you're going to be protected against those claims as long as you maintain it properly. You get good guidance from your attorney, and you keep it up on a regular basis annually, have it reviewed, checked in, make sure it's all done right so that you don't have the piercing the corporate veil issue, and start today so you can get past that fraudulent conveyance doctrine rule. So there's the secret sauce on how asset protection can really work and has to work. At the end of the day, you need to protect your family, you need to protect your business, and you need to protect your legacy. That's how it all comes together. Now, we're doing these types of educational performances, workshops. If you have any other questions, please throw it in chat. Whether it's now or later, we'll come back and answer any questions that may come up. But we are getting a newsletter out. Definitely check us out at entrepreneur.com. Find a little bit more information about myself and co-host Jillian Sidoti. Not here today. We'll be here next week doing more interviews with different team members that you will need, different entrepreneurs that have their own strategies and how they made it happen, how they grew their dynasty that is protected through all the strategies that I discussed today. So please join us, join our email newsletter, subscribe to our channel, check us out at entrepreneur.com. But thank you so much for taking a little bit of your time today to learn a little bit about asset protection. And if you have any questions, actually just go, any questions that you don't feel comfortable with putting in chat. And no, don't put something in chat that is very personal to you. This is all public. Don't put in chat, I've got this lawsuit, let me tell you about it. I have this problem, let me tell you about it. For God's sakes, don't put that in chat. However, set up a consultation, estateprotectionlawyers.com, or whatever attorney that you're working with. Make sure that you're doing stuff right. There is what's called attorney-client confidentiality. Right now, I'm not your attorney. I don't have to protect any of your information. And if you disclose it publicly, the world knows it. You're not protected. But once you engage with an attorney, they become your attorney. And this really starts as soon as we start providing legal advice and direction that's specific to you back to, this is all very educational and general. But if you have those situations that you need some asset protection, you need some legal support, go to this estateprotectionlawyers.com. There's a contact information in there, and feel free to reach out. That's actually the best way to reach me directly to talk about asset protection. With that, if there are no other questions, please throw it in chat if there's anything else. Otherwise, I'm going to stare awkwardly at the camera for just a second and then say bye. Thank you all for joining today. Really appreciate you being here and taking that time. Till next week, we're from Entrepreneur, where we're building businesses, and at least today, protecting your ass pets.